Thank you for participating in the Contract Administration training for Old Dominion University. You are performing a very valuable and important role for the university. The purpose of the training is to provide an overview of the contract administration process and the associated responsibilities you and/or your department have in administering university contracts. Contract administration requires a thorough understanding of the contract being administered, as well as an understanding of the policies and procedures Old Dominion University is held accountable for throughout the contract administration process. This training provides an overview of these policies and procedures. Please keep in mind, all contract administrators at ODU are responsible for understanding and complying with the full contract administration policy, which can be found on the Procurement Services website on the Laws, Policies, and Procedures page. We'll begin by defining a legally binding contract. A contract is a legally enforceable agreement between two or more competent parties where an offer is made and accepted and lawful consideration is exchanged. To be enforceable, a contract must be made between competent parties, where both parties understand the elements of what is being covered by the contract. There's also the element of good faith and legality, meaning neither party shall be attempting to deceive the other party, and the contract must not violate the law. ODU contracts are typically either EVA purchase orders and/or formal two-party contracts that purchase orders are issued against. For formal contracts, where the contract administrator is designated in writing by Procurement Services, the contract administrator will generally be the end user of the contract, or someone who has a vested interest in the contract's performance. The contract administrator will be responsible for monitoring both the contractor's and the university's performance throughout the contract term to ensure that the provisions of the contract are being carried out as agreed. This includes, but is not limited to, making sure the contractor provides the goods or services in accordance with the terms of the contract, as well as making sure the university is meeting their contractual requirements, such as paying invoices for those goods or services in a timely manner. When an EVA purchase order is issued and serves as the sole contract document, the department requester is typically considered the contract administrator for that contract. In this case, the requesting department is responsible for ensuring that the e-receiver is completed in Banner within 3 days of receipt of goods or services. Now that we understand what a contract is, let's take a look at contract administration. Once a contract is awarded to a vendor or contractor, we can't just assume that all of the terms and conditions that were agreed upon are going to be met during the term of the contract. Therefore, contract administration is the continued process of monitoring all aspects of a contract to ensure that all parties are compliant with the defined and specified contractual terms, conditions, rights, and obligations, and that performance is in accordance with the defined specifications or scope of work. To ensure appropriate contract management, oversight, and compliance, the Department of Procurement Services may designate, when applicable, a contract administrator in writing after a contract award is issued. The contract administrator should be the end user of the contract or someone who is responsible for overseeing the contract requirements. This individual is responsible for maintaining contract files, understanding all requirements of the contract, and ensuring they are appropriately provided. While terms and conditions vary from contract to contract, there are several responsibilities that a contract administrator will always have. At a minimum, the CA, contract administrator, will always need to ensure that 1. The contract file is current and complete, 2. The contract is still applicable and valid, 3. The contract renewal surveys are filled out and returned to Procurement Services in a timely manner, 4. The contractor is providing goods and/or services in accordance with the contract, and that any deficiencies are documented and communicated, and 5. Invoices are reviewed by the CA to ensure pricing is in line with the contract. The contractor performance renewal surveys are sent approximately 90 days before the end of a contract's current term. Contract administrators must complete the survey documenting contractor performance for the current term and return it to Procurement Services in a timely manner. The contract administrator is also responsible for ensuring that the contract is administered in a legal and ethical manner. For contract administrators who are designated in writing through a contract administration memo, a conflict of interest and ethics in public contracting training, as well as a statement of economic interests form, will need to be completed through Human Resources. Contract administrators, along with any staff assisting with the administration of contracts, should complete the Ethics in Procurement online training, which can be found on the Procurement Services website on the training page. Violations by the contract administrator and/or the contract administrator's staff who have contract administration duties may result in that person being removed as contract administrator and, depending on the nature of the violation, could result in further disciplinary action. As previously noted, one of the duties of the contract administrator is to maintain a complete contract administration file. While the contract administrator may elect to add additional information to the file must contain at a minimum 1. The contract administration memo, 2. A complete copy of the contract, 3. Contract administration action plan, 4. Any contract modifications, 5. All invoices and payment records specific to the contract, 6. Vendor performance documentation, 7. A copy or copies of the completed contract evaluation surveys, 8. Signed renewal forms if applicable, and 9. Any reports the contractor is required to provide by the terms of the contract. The contract document and its associated Contract Administration Action Plan, or CAP, will identify the requirements of the contract. It's important that the contract administrator is very familiar with each requirement. Some terms and associated responsibilities to keep in mind relate to shipping and receiving of goods. Shipping and delivery of goods. The general university policy is to request that all goods be shipped FOB destination, meaning the ownership transfers to the university once the goods are received by the university. The contract administrator should also ensure that deliveries are within the delivery time frame as specified in the contract and/or associated purchase order. Inspection, receiving, and acceptance. Inspection is the examination of the goods and/or services provided by the contractor. The CA and/or designated staff is responsible for inspection of goods and/or services upon receipt. Receiving. If accepted, the CA or designated staff member is responsible for completing the e-receiver and banner within 3 days of receipt to ensure prompt payment to the contractor. Most goods will be shipped directly to the requesting department. The exception to that is equipment purchased through the Equipment Trust Fund ETF program. That equipment will be shipped to the Property Control Warehouse for ETF tagging. The Property Control team will complete banner e-receivers for ETF equipment once all items are received. As previously noted, it is the CA's responsibility to ensure that goods and/or services comply with the contract. If they do not, it is the CA's responsibility to promptly reject the goods or services that don't comply. Rejection can be partial or total. Any time a delivery is rejected, the CA should notify the contractor immediately of the issue and cause for rejection, making sure to document the event. If the CA is unable to resolve the issue with the contractor, it may be appropriate to complete a procurement complaint form to submit to the contractor, with a copy to Procurement Services. The procurement complaint form can be found on the Procurement Services website under Forms. There may be instances when damages or defects may not be obvious at delivery, but are discovered later. This is referred to as concealed damage or latent defects. If such damage or defects are found, the contractor should be notified within 7 days. Since the damages or defects are of no fault of the university, the contractor is responsible for replacing the goods within the originally stated delivery time and at no additional cost to the university. If a shipment for goods or equipment is delivered in accordance with the contract provisions and the CA or assigned staff reject the shipment, the university may be considered in breach of contract and may be required to pay restocking, storage, or additional delivery fees to the contractor. Before a decision is made to reject a delivery, the cost of these additional fees should be considered. It's important to keep in mind that just as a contractor can be guilty of breach of contract for not upholding their end of the agreement, the university can also be guilty of breach of contract if we do not uphold our end. The goal of the CA is to work toward resolution for any issues that may arise. Variations in quantity that are customary to an industry are referred to as underruns and overruns. When the university and a contractor enter into a purchase order or contract, the quantity of the goods ordered is stated in the purchase documentation. As a result, the CA or assigned staff should not accept goods in excess of those agreed upon, unless it is customary for that particular industry, such as cable, fabric, printing, carpet, etc., and/or the procurement officer has deemed it acceptable. If overruns will be accepted, they shall not exceed 10% of the purchase order amount, or $500, whichever is less, and the overrun price must not exceed the quoted base price or agreed upon price for additional units. The price for underruns will be calculated at the quoted base price per unit. Once the goods and/or services have been received, the contractor is responsible for providing an accurate and complete invoice in a timely manner. If the intent is to pay invoice via the purchasing card, the CA or assigned staff should communicate that information upon ordering goods and/or services. In this case, the vendor should submit the invoice directly to the CA or assigned staff. Upon review and authorization for payment, the contractor is responsible for providing an appropriate receipt to the CA. The CA is responsible for uploading the receipt into Works with the associated transaction and properly documenting the details of the transaction to include contract number or purpose of transaction. If a purchase order was used to place an order with the contractor shall send the invoice directly to invoice@odu.edu. It is highly recommended that the CA request the contractor to copy them on the invoice submission. As a reminder, the CA or assigned staff is responsible for promptly completing an e-receiver in Banner upon receipt of the goods and/or services. Just as there can be defects in products delivered, there can also be defects in an invoice. An invoice can be considered defective or improper for many reasons. An example of a defective or improper invoice is if there is no purchase order number on the invoice. Without a PO number, the invoice cannot be matched to a purchase. Another example of a defect in an invoice would be if the purchase document states one price and the invoice shows a different price. When a defect or impropriety in an invoice is identified, accounts payable will notify the contractor of receiving the invoice if the defect would prevent payment by the payment due date. The prompt payment clock does not begin until the invoice issue is resolved. All contracts should have agreed upon payment terms. In the event that special payment terms are not included specifically in the contract, per the Code of Virginia, the payment terms default to net 30 days. This means that payment is due 30 days after receipt of a proper invoice or 30 days after receipt of the goods or services, whichever date is later. This is why it is critical that the CA or designated staff inspect goods and/or services in a timely manner and, if acceptable, complete the e-receiver in Banner within 3 days. This will ensure prompt payment to the vendor. In the constantly evolving environment in which we work, change is expected. The university's needs for goods and/or services sometimes change. Therefore, a modification and/or change order to a purchase order may be required. If a requested change affects price, quality, quantity, delivery, or could result in the cancellation of the contract, the CA and/or requesting department shall submit a written request with supporting justification to procurement services for final review and approval. Before any change is made, it should be thoroughly evaluated for contract validity and price reasonableness. Procurement services will work with the CA and/or requesting department to determine if a formal contract modification is required and/or if a change order to an existing purchase order is required. University personnel should wait to notify a contractor that a change has been approved until it has been authorized by procurement services. When requesting modifications or change orders, there are several things to consider. There are situations where change orders are not needed. Changes to budget or sub-account codes should not be done through EVA change orders. An IDT, ASR, or budget adjustment can be used to make these changes. Accounts payable will obtain approval from the appropriate budget unit director. Invoices in excess of the purchase order amount are already authorized to be paid by accounts payable up to 10% per line item, not to exceed $100 per purchase order, without the requester processing a change order. Equipment trust fund purchases are an exception. There is a zero cost variation for equipment trust fund purchases, so any price variations between the purchase order and the invoice amount will require a change order. Each contract includes an initial term period, and many include the option to renew for additional terms. To identify next steps, a contractor evaluation performance survey is sent to the CA 90 to 120 days prior to the end of the current term. The CA is responsible for completing the survey in a timely manner, which is within 10 days of receipt. The CA should include details related to the contractor's performance, both good and bad, as well as any issues that need to be resolved prior to renewing. It's important that the CA complete the survey in a timely manner, as it assists in determining next steps. Some steps take time, so beginning the renewal, modification, or solicitation process in a timely manner helps ensure there are no interruptions in the provided goods and/or services. Contracts are only valid for 1. The time period specified in the contract, and/or 2. For the agreed upon quantities and amounts specified in the contract. A contract cannot be renewed unless it contains renewal language provisions. However, procurement services and the contractor may renegotiate the contract term, including any extensions and additional renewal periods, if adequate and appropriate compensation for all parties can be agreed upon. Some contracts contain language regarding price increases in the renewal provision. In those cases, the price increases are not automatically given. If the contractor requests a price increase, procurement services may review, negotiate, and approve the request if appropriate. If a contract does not have a renewal period, but the work being performed won't be finished before the contract expires, procurement services may extend the term of the existing contract up to 6 months to allow completion of work that has been undertaken. However, no additional consideration exceeding the contracted price may be paid to the contractor unless approved in writing by procurement services. Any time a change is made to a contract term, it should be documented in writing through a contract modification. In situations where there are no renewal options left, contract administrators should provide updated scopes of work or specifications to procurement services in a timely manner to allow for resolicitation. Failure of a department to provide updated scopes of work or specifications to procurement services in a timely manner does not justify extension of a contract. If resolicitation is required, procurement services will work closely with the CA and/or requesting department. Contract cancellations may only be authorized by procurement services. Contract administrators do not have this authority. If a contract administrator would like for a contract to be canceled, a request for cancellation should be sent to procurement services with an explanation for the request. Contractors may also request cancellation of a contract, and the university may comply if the contractor is prevented from performing their contractual obligations due to an act of war, order of legal authority, act of God, or other unavoidable cause not attributed to the contractor's fault or negligence. Anytime a contract is canceled, it must be done in writing via the appropriate purchase order or formal contract document as authorized by procurement services. As noted, contract administrators are responsible for ensuring the contractor is performing in accordance with the contract terms. The CA should document any issues and work with the contractor toward resolution. The procurement complaint form is a formal tool to be used by the CA for reporting complaints and/or discrepancies in contractor performance. When this form is sent to a contractor by procurement services, the contractor is required to respond within 10 days with a corrective action plan. Should the contractor not respond to the procurement complaint form, Procurement Services will send a cure letter. This letter can be used in conjunction with the procurement complaint form to provide the contractor a period of time to correct or cure the problem stated on the procurement complaint form. It also advises the contractor of the consequences for failure to take required corrective action, which may include debarment or enjoinment from conducting future business with the university and/or other Commonwealth of Virginia agencies. Procurement Services will work closely with the contract administrator through this process. In some instances, a contractor will notify the university that they refuse or cannot deliver or complete performance on a contract. In those situations, it is not necessary to follow the procedure of using a cure notification. However, a procurement complaint form may be submitted to the contractor with a copy to the Department of Procurement Services to provide a historical file for future determinations of responsibility, etc. Procurement Services will then issue to the contractor a notice for termination for default. As a contract administrator, you are performing a critical role in ensuring the integrity of the purchasing process for your department. It is critical to keep the best interest of the university in mind while ensuring that both the contractor as well as the university follow all applicable policies, procedures, and laws to maintain continued accuracy, ethical standards, and transparency. Various resources are noted here. If you've not already done so, please complete the Ethics and Procurement training found on the ODU Procurement Services website. As always, the procurement team is a resource and is happy to assist in all contracting and contract administration needs. Congratulations! You have completed this online training. For completion to be recorded, please be sure to submit verification of your attendance using the certification link directly below in the YouTube comment.